I'm not abandoning my people.
Take this and go.
I don't know how to use it.
Hey! Today I'm making the Dragonglass Dagger that Arya gives to Sansa in Game of Thrones. This is a fun and quick project and I'm only using the most simple tools and materials. So as we all know, the show is almost pitch black and it is very hard to see anything. We only see the dagger in a couple of scenes, when Arya gives it to Sansa and when Sansa hands it to Tyrion. Both of the clips are dark and I actually have already brightened it. This was what it really looked like.
Sticking with the pointy end.
Just kidding. Here is a picture of the weapons that Sam and the others found many seasons ago. They look completely different than, for example, Gendry's and Tormund's weapons. I based my dagger to all of the clips we got to see of the actual weapon and to other weapons. Anyways, you can make the dagger look like whatever you like. Let's begin. I had already drawn the dagger onto paper. According to this scene, the dagger has bigger bumps on the other side and small teeth on the other. Then I added tape to the edges to make them stronger and then I cut it out. I had already measured how long I want the blade and handle to be. Tools and materials I used for this project are a dull box cutter, EVA foam. That is the material that yoga and sleeping mats are sometimes made. Contact glue, paint brushes, paint and craft glue. The foam I use is from Biltema. I will link it down below so you can buy it if you live in the Nordic countries. A dull box cutter will only cut EVA foam that is quite dense. Normally I would use a sharp box cutter, but this time I wanted to make things as beginner friendly as I could. And also because I sharpened the blade on my balcony and now my balcony was full of the yellow powder that comes from trees. Fellow Nordics must know the problem, like what happened this year. If you try to cut bad foam, which is soft and squishy with a dull box cutter, this will happen. It will be very hard to cut and impossible to carve. You might be able to make something like Minecraft swords out of it, but that's about it. It does not cut well because it is too soft. The same dull knife makes nicer cuts to the better foam. I drew the outline of the dagger to the foam twice and cut them out very roughly and cleaned the cut afterwards. I did it twice because one layer would be too thin. Remember to cut slowly if you make cuts, for example standing up, so you don't stab yourself. And remember to protect your working surface. This foam has a rough backing, so it has to be cut off. Remember to use safety gloves when cutting. This is quite annoying and slow, and all the little pieces that I cut off are very static, so I always vacuum the area after I am done with the cutting. During this step I broke my knife twice. The blade detached from the handle and I had to learn how to assemble it, because I had never replaced it. I always just sharpen the blade with sandpaper and only change the blade if it breaks in half. I recommend wearing safety glasses because of that risk. Then I took 2 scrap pieces of foam to use as a plate and brush for my contact glue. If you are not familiar with contact glue, it must be applied to both sides of the pieces that you are gluing together and left to dry for a couple of minutes before slapping them together. I highly recommend the glue for foam projects. I'm not sure if you could use something like super glue for this, but I think hot glue would probably not work. Sorry. If you want the dagger to be very sturdy, I would add something like barbecue sticks between the two foam layers. Otherwise it will stay quite fragile and might break in half if you run into something with it. I applied a thin layer of glue. It might look like there is not enough, but this glue is just strange and it works very well when you just apply a thin layer. A tube like this will last for a long time. I used to have a big tin of this and it also lasted very long, but it dried out too quickly, so for now I'm using tubes. I let the first layer dry for a while and decided to add a second layer just to be sure. The drying time is usually written in the package, so just follow the instructions of your glue. If you have pets or small children around you, just make sure you use this glue in a different room or go outside to do it. Then I aligned the pieces as well as I could, because once you put the parts together, you should not rip them apart anymore, or you might have to add new layers of glue. Remember to wear gloves when working with strong glues and paints, and work in a well-ventilated area. Then I started carving the foam with my box cutter. In this step I really noticed that the blade was too dull in my opinion, but I didn't let it slow me down. I used my drawing and imagination to create the shape, and you could basically do anything you want with your weapon. I wanted some sharp shapes because that is what I think Dragonglass would look like. But some of the weapons in the show are very soft and smooth looking for some reason, so you can do anything you want. I made bigger bumps on the other side. I used my drawing to mark how many I needed, and then I cut the excess off and rounded the bumps very roughly and randomly, so they would look natural. Then I drew on some lines where I want to carve it out more and carve it some more. I lost the footage of making the smaller saw-looking teeth on the other side and carving those grooves, so I filmed this clip to show it. And do wear gloves, please. Then I sanded the dagger with regular sanding paper. This is not required. I just had some spiky looking parts on the dagger, but you could also use the box cutter or just rip them out. Also, the layers of primer and paints will cover them anyways. Then I used a heat gun to seal the dagger. This eliminates all of the fuzziness that I got from sanding. It also makes the surface just a bit more harder, but I don't think this is needed. I sometimes skip this step too. I don't think a normal hairdryer would heat the foam enough, so if you don't own a heat gun, you can just skip this step. Then I cleaned my table, and as I said, the crumbs that come from the cutting are very static, so I used a wet paper towel to try to get them to the trash bag, otherwise they will fly out of the bag. Now it is time to prime and paint. In my opinion, this is the most fun part. I shielded my table with paper and used my trusty little cling wrap to cover that thing, so I don't have to wash it like 20 times. I am using a synthetic rounded brush, which is the best for painting things like this. I got mine from Clas Ohlson, but you could probably find these for the best price if you Google synthetic makeup brushes. My set came with other brushes that I have not used so far. And I always used this one, so I should probably get more of them. I will leave a link down below if I find good ones. First, I primed my weapon with gesso. This is from Clas Ohlson too. I'm not really sure what gesso is, but I know that it leaves a rough finish unlike most things that you brush on. And it has the smell of art classrooms. You could also skip priming and paint directly to the foam, but I want to make sure the paint won't chip. Also, if your paints are expensive and you have some cracks to fill, you might want to fill them with something inexpensive. You could use craft glue for this step too. It will be smoother to apply if you mix water to it. So, I applied a generous amount of gesso, trying to get it to every unnecessary crack and dent. Oh, and this is what the foam looked like after heating it with the heat gun. It looks glittery for some reason. I'm not completely sure, but I think you could add a drop of black acrylic paint to the gesso or glue, just to make things a bit easier. It feels kind of funny to have a dark grey weapon first painted white and then back to black. Then, after adding 1 to 2 layers of gesso, I started painting the weapon with acrylic paints. These are from Claes Olsson too. I got them in a set of 5 and they were quite inexpensive. I like using acrylic paints because they are easy to mix and paint on, and they don't smell or stain, but you could use any paints for this part. I also made a little test piece so I can test what my finishing layer will look like. I applied a generous layer of the black paint, but in some spots the gesso wasn't completely dry, so it turned grey, but this does not matter. Have you ever done 2 layers of nail polish and ended up with nails that never dried? That doesn't happen with acrylic paints. I believe the first layer will continue drying under the second layer. I was watching Bernadette Banner's sewing videos in the background. I feel like I am more productive when I am watching someone else crafting. Then I continued with my test piece. I mixed craft glue with water and a small amount of silver acrylic paint, which is kind of like glitter paint, and the result looked nice. I'm not looking for a glittery result, but a small amount of silver will give the weapon a nice instant shine. If you want to get the same kind of look as in these pictures, you could skip the layer of black paint and paint the weapon dark grey and cover it in dark silver paint, or mix silver with black paint. You could also use colors like blue or grey or whatever you like. Now I am mixing a lighter color just to give a couple of spots a bit of dimension. This is optional and I only did it for fun. You can only see these if you look very closely. Then it was time to finish the surface with the mixture I had already tested. When you are using paint or glue straight from the tube without mixing, you want to only take a bit at a time so you don't waste it, since you can always take some more if you run out. But with cocktails like this one that has glue, water and 2 paints, you might want to mix it all in one batch, because you don't want the color to change midway, and also because glue, unlike other paints, does not like to be touched after it has started drying. I kind of miscalculated the amount that I will need, so I did the rest of the way with just glue, but I knew I will add a second coat. Oh, and you could also just use a finishing spray, but because I wanted to keep the cost down, I will use glue. These glue layers will give the weapon shine, durability, and the glue does feel a lot nicer when you hold it. But multiple layers of glue can't handle bending at all, so don't bend it. This looked quite cool as the glue was starting to dry, almost like an icy piece of metal. This look could be made with paint too. Then I added more highlights by using a fine brush and the silver paint. I am adding tiny stripes and dots just anywhere where I see the light from my window shining. This is completely optional too, but I think it gave the weapon a nice icy and shiny look. This can be done before or after the glue layers. After this, I added a generous second glue layer. And this is the final result. What do you think? Does this look anything like the weapon? I think it looks cool anyways. I'm actually planning on making the weapon that Gendry made for Arya, so stay tuned if you want to see it too. I'm currently working on Sansa's costume, so if you are interested in Game of Thrones, or if you just want to see more, subscribe so you won't forget the name of this channel. See you in the next video. Bye!